Il y a deux défis au Québec. Un économique, lié à la pénurie de main-d'œuvre, et un de vitalité de la langue. 80% des immigrants ne travaillent pas, ne parlent pas français ou n'adhèrent pas aux valeurs de la société québécoise. La clé, c'est la régionalisation et la francisation.
That is Jean Boulet, the Labor and Immigration Minister, at a debate in the Trois-Rivières. I guess this happened last week, coming to light today. We've heard reaction from everyone today. I want you to hear Tom Mulcair is on the line. Tom, this is what Eric Duhem had to say about that.
It's pathetic because it's not the first time. If it was just a slip, we could, and he apologizes, we say, okay, it's a mistake, whatever. It's not just Mr. Boulet, it's also the Premier himself. François Legault associated immigration with violence a few days ago. If I had done that, I could tell you I would probably be already politically disqualified. If I said things like what Mr. Boulet said, he's saying that 80% of immigrants in Quebec don't work, don't speak French, and live in Montreal. It's all, and don't share Quebec values. It's all false assumptions, and it's not a judgment that I'm making. It's facts.
He's right, Tom. It is facts. We know the facts, and we know that all the things that Jean Boulet said are, in fact, wrong. Now, the question is, did he do that on purpose? He knows he's the minister. He would know that those figures were wrong, would he not?
I sincerely believe he did that on purpose, but I'm going to insist on mentioning something about who just made that critique of Jean Boulet. This is, by the way, the same Eric Duhem who yesterday was leaving the door open to perhaps putting up a wall around Quebec to keep people out. The same person who boasted when he had his show in Quebec City that he had done an estimate of how much it would cost to put up a fence with or without barbed wire to keep people from migrating as they're allowed to do under Canadian and international law through Roxham Road. That's the same Eric Duhem, just so we know who we're talking about here, okay?
Fair enough.
Now, let's get to Jean Boulet. I think that you're asking the key question. Is it possible for someone who's been in that driver's seat, who's had all the facts and figures at his fingertips in the Ministry of Immigration, can make that sort of mistake? And I would say that it's not possible that this is a mistake. And it goes to the heart of the discussion we're having right now. And it goes actually, in my view, also to Eric Duhem, because, of course, even though this debate took place several days ago and is only coming out now, these are the types of things that people around Mr. Legault, and, of course, primarily Mr. Legault himself, have been saying throughout this campaign. And why have they been ratcheting up the rhetoric, the anti-immigrant and anti-minority rhetoric during this campaign? Well, it's because there's a guy breathing down their necks named Eric Duhem who is saying things like, well, you know what? I'm going to leave the door open to putting a wall around Quebec to keep immigrants out. So there's no accident in this stuff, but there's a lot of deep irony, because to hear Yves Duhem make that complaint about Jean Boulet is literally the pot calling the kettle black. I mean, I just can't believe they'd have the chutzpah to try to make that statement as if he was shocked and appalled at what he had just heard when he's been playing the same game. This is called, minority baiting. You're going after people. Legault has done it in several different ways. At the beginning, of course, he was using words like violence, and he talked about la chicane, that good old Quebec word. They're just quarrelsome. They're going to bring their quarrels here if we let these people into Quebec. Don't you know? And this is the type of prejudice, and that was the term I used in my Journal de Montréal column, and it was a big title splash in that article saying, look, this is Legault showing his prejudices. And that's what that is. It's you're prejudging people based on who they are, not what they are, or what it's based on the fact that they're coming from somewhere else and they're different from you. You're prejudging what they can do or won't do in our society. It's a terrible situation. I would say that this is a notch worse in the case of Boulet, because I always hold back. People sometimes say, well, Bill 21, clearly racist, and I always call it discriminatory, because racist is several notches above in terms of what you're saying. You have to know about the person who's saying it. But I don't hesitate to say I would not call Jean Boulet a racist. I don't know enough about him to know if he is or isn't. But I can tell you that the statements he made, for me, qualify as racist statements, because he is clearly setting out, he's targeting a category of persons. And he's saying it doesn't matter, if you're a good person or not. The fact that you're an immigrant, this is the category you're in. And he asserts this as if it was a fact. And let's talk about that for a second, because since the beginning of this campaign, people have been playing fast and loose with figures about the use of French in Quebec. There have never been more people in Quebec who spoke French than now. But you're not allowed to say that because you're supposed to say, no, if you look at the figures this way, it means, if you look at how many people are using it at home, and of course people were going to CJAD, it's terrible, they're learning another language. This is the game that's being played. So all of the facts and figures that have been put on the table are open to debate and discussion, which is a good thing. But when somebody comes up with something that he asserts as being a fact, which is what Boulet did here. He's the minister, for heaven's sake. He has all of the information, and he's saying, I will now share a fact with you that 80% of people who immigrate to Quebec, they don't have jobs, they can't speak French, and they don't share our values. That is scandalous, and that affirmation, those statements, as far as I'm concerned, are racist.
So what happens next, Tom? We know that he's not going to be the immigration minister anymore. We took calls.
Sorry, Natasha, to get upset, but if Legault has the ball, the temerity to say that this guy has been disqualified from being the minister of immigration, for heaven's sakes, can Legault hold on to him as a candidate?
Totally,
a woman who's running in an election here on the in Camille Lorrain riding gets filmed pilfering a flyer, and she's made to walk the plank. This guy makes these statements that are false and that he knows to be false, and it's only when it finally comes out that he backtracks and starts to make amends. And Legault's going to keep this guy as a candidate. That says more about Legault than it does about Jean Boulet.
I agree so wholeheartedly. And I wish these guys would just have a conversation with immigrants.
But wait,
we took calls today.
We can agree. I want to know, Tom, from you, will it happen? You can agree that this would be the right thing to do.
I think that we're Wednesday before a Monday election.
Happening.
I think that if this starts to become understood what we're talking about here, how egregious this is, how grossly unacceptable it is in our society to have a person who's, by the way, he's been the minister up until the dissolution of this government. It's one thing for Legault to say he doesn't want him as a minister, but how can he say that he wants this guy to be elected to the National Assembly? Mm-hmm. And how can he go further and say, I want him elected to the National Assembly and be part of my caucus? How is that even possible? After what he said today, he made up facts that will stir up people's passions against immigrants, and he's telling lies, and Legault thinks that he can still be his candidate. That's what's so unacceptable to me. When this thing broke this morning, I sent it in right away. The second it broke, I said, this is going to be huge news. And one of the mysteries is, how did it finally bubble its way to the surface? I've been following the newspaper articles that have been setting the record straight, showing that immigrants work harder than most, and they wind up, contributing and being employed at as high level as people who've been here forever. And all you have to do is know people who are immigrants. They're working 2 jobs, 3 jobs. They're doing everything they can to get themselves and their kids ahead. My wife immigrated to this country, and I remember the whole process of going through it when we were getting married. This goes back almost 50 years, but everybody has some member of the family or a close friend who immigrated to Canada. I was listening to the show before with the guy who just got 9 of the quiz questions right. I mean, says, I got here 7 years ago, and by the way, I never took a French class, but my French is nearly fluent now. Yeah, he'd be dismissed as an anecdote by François Legault.
No, you're right. I'm curious, though, Tom, you have the unique perspective of having, been on the French side doing media today. What's reaction been on that side?
It hadn't broken yet. So my last French radio show this morning was before this thing broke. When I got back home after doing that French radio show, then this thing was just breaking then. So I haven't done any French media, and I won't be back on La Joute until tomorrow.
All right.
You'll have to tell us.
I mean,
I'm absolutely, I don't know how this is going to fly in French media. How do they make this okay? How do they make this acceptable? It's just not possible.
I don't think it's interesting, but because I've only been able to read what other people have been putting online, and they've been pretty well as harsh as I'm being right now.
Good.
Because some of this stuff is play acting on all sides. Oh, I can't believe you did this. Oh, I can't believe that happened. But this event, to have the person who up until a couple of weeks ago was the immigration minister of Quebec saying this, and the worst part is he's putting it out as fact.
Yeah.
And then when he gets caught, he goes, Legault says it was in the heat of the moment. What heat? Of what moment?
Yeah.
In what? In a discussion in Trois-Rivières on Radio-Canada? There was so much, what, somebody had a gun to your head and said, say these statistics, otherwise something terrible will happen. Come on. It's baloney. There was no heat. There was no passion. The guy was making stuff up.
Yeah, and look who's making excuses for him. The guy who compared, having more immigration to being equivalent of suicide in Quebec. So, we know, look who it's coming from. Good God.
And so it goes back to the earlier question. What's the motive here? Why has Legault been playing this game? Why has it been going after the Anglos, the language, people who speak a language other than French? Oh, they're tearing away our social fabric, our social cohesion, going after immigrants, saying, oh, violence, extremism, chicane, even going so far as to say, everything's settled with regard to, the First Nations community around Joliette. This just in. No, it's not. Oh, he finally had to apologize for that one, because the rest of it is just, but what's he been doing? Why has he been going so white hot on these minority and immigration issues during this campaign? I'll tell you why. Because he's got Eric Duhem breathing down his neck. Mm-hmm. Because Duhem plays this game smarter than he does, and he's up in Quebec City about to probably, quite probably, steal a couple of seats from him, and he doesn't like it. So he's going to try to show that he's not going to be outdone by Eric Duhem on this file with regard to immigrants. Duhem wants to put up a wall. Legault won't go that far. Oh, by the way, this is the richest part, because on Tout le monde en parle on Sunday, Duhem asked Legault to apologize for comparing him to Donald Trump, and then what? 3 days later, he's saying he wants to put up a wall for immigrants. Come on.
By the way, Tom, I'll let you know, I'm looking at the front page or whatever the online page for the Journal de Montréal right now is, and Eric or Jean Boulet's picture is there, but it says Minister de l'Immigration Boulet disqualifié. In other words, nothing about immigration, just that he's been disqualified, which is interesting for a headline. And then well down the page, Francois Legault, as Natasha just mentioned, on this idea that it would be suicide to take in more than 50,000 immigrants here in Quebec.
I'm glad you put that back into this conversation, because there's been so much happening over the Boulet thing that we almost skipped over that. But think of that again. What was his equation? Too much immigration equals suicide. Yeah. That's a loaded term for Quebec, to say nothing about how hurtful it is to people who have had to deal with that very real issue. But to make that equation between immigration and suicide for the Quebec nation, this is overheated rhetoric. It is harmful, it's hurtful, and it's something that I just can't believe that we're going through. And when this hits the papers in the rest of Canada, and it will, there's going to be so much hand-wringing. Oh, they're attacking Quebec. No, they're not attacking Quebec. They're attacking what you just said and what your Minister of Immigration just said.
A lot to talk about, a lot to unpack, and it's not going to be done at the end of today. Tom, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.
Talk to you tomorrow.
All right. Kind of worked up there. It's good. It's nice that this is finally getting through.
It's so distressing. Yeah. It's so terribly upsetting.